Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And with the 2026 draft officially over, I figured I would give my grades and reactions to every pick made by every team. So with no further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with the Cardinals, who, if you all saw my reaction to the first round picks, I did not like the Jeremiah Love pick. I just think, well, one, they don't have a need at running back. Like, yes, Love is a great talent, but like when you restructure James Conner's contract to bring him back, when you sign Tyler Algier to a 2-year deal, you already have Trey Benson. Like, it's just they've already invested so much into the running back position where it's like you don't need a running back. And so in my opinion, that's just a bad pick. But I did like Chase Basantis improving this offensive line. I thought they were going to go tackle in the first round. So I did like them at least investing in one of their top picks in this offensive line, to at least help this team out. The Carson Beck selection, I was not a fan of. I thought there were better QBs available at that pick. And I also figured, after Ty Simpson went, it kind of felt like the Cardinals would pivot to like drafting one on day 3 and more so saying, hey, if that works out, it works out, but we'll probably move on to 2027. Instead, they draft back, which I thought was a bad pick. I did like the Caleb Proctor pick. I thought because they've needed defensive line help for a while, so I did think that was a good pick. You could pair him up with Walter Nolan if he works out as a fourth round pick. And then the rest of the picks were fine. Like Arizona, I'd probably give them like probably a C plus, just because two of their top 3 selections I just was not fans of. So yeah, moving on to the Falcons, who I actually like their draft. Obviously, no first round pick, but bringing Avion Terrell, AJ Terrell's younger brother, to be the corner on the other side, I thought was an amazing pickup. I was surprised he made it to pick 48. Like, I figured he was going to be a either like mid to late first round pick or early second round pick. He falls a lot farther than I would have thought he was going to fall. So I like that pick. I like bringing Zach Branch, um, who is an amazing athlete and can give his wide receiver room another body out there. Because they have Drake London and then they have a bunch of other guys. So I think Branch could emerge as that secondary guy. And then, I mean, I like some of their day 3 selections. I mean, both linebackers and Kendall Daniels and Harold Perkins Jr., even though Perkins is not really a linebacker, he's more like a chess piece where you can move him around. So I did like them investing into that defense that has been much better in recent years because of this young core they're building. And then going with Ethan, I think it's Onyawan out of Ohio State. You lose Caleb McGarry, so bring in at least some, potential backup help that maybe could become a starter one day for this Falcons team. So I would give them an A. And the grades you see on the screen are not my grades. These are NFL.com's grades. So I would give them an A. I thought this was a great draft for the Falcons, really investing into this team, and hopefully they find their quarterback, whether Penix or Tua works out, or whether they draft somebody next year. Um, Moving on to the Ravens, my favorite team, and I mean I love this pick. I love this class, I should say. I mean Olavego Olawane was an amazing pick. I mean they got a instant starter at guard for a team that was desperate for O line help. They brought in Zion Young, who I thought was a top 5 pass rusher in this class, an easy top 20 player. Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt, I thought were great selections. It gives the Ravens 2 more pieces on that offense for Lamar to throw to. The Matthew Hibner pick from SMU, I don't, another great pass catcher for the team. I mean, the Chandler Rivers pick on day three, I was surprised he made it that far. He could be. I mean, we've seen the Ravens hit on a lot of recent corners on like day two and day three, more so day three, that they have hit on, like TJ Tampa from a couple of years ago. So I think this could be another hit. I mean, the rest of the class I thought was good. Like the Ravens, I thought did an amazing job with all their picks, being able to get, you know, great players at good value. Like I don't think anybody would have said, you know, oh, the Ravens got all these players at these picks. So I think it's great value for a team that, is a contender year in and year out with Lamar. And I liked all these picks. I give the Ravens an A+ draft for how great they were able to get elite players at picks I was surprised they went at. Moving on to the Bills, who traded back out of the first round. But I like the TJ Parker selection. I was a big fan of Parker. I thought he was a first round talent. And to get him early on at 35th overall, I thought was amazing value. Davison and Igbenogson, I thought was great value. Um, at 62, give this team another corner outside. I mean, the Skylar Bell pick I thought was a home run. Him and Jalen Kilgore, who I was surprised both guys made it to day three with how talented they are. Bell, I think, gives you another weapon on the outside after bringing in DJ Moore. You have Khalil Shakir, hopefully Kincaid and Knox um, are going to be still productive. I thought Skylar Bell, tremendous value for um, the player than Kilgore. I was surprised. I thought he was going to be at worst a day two pick because of just how talented he was. Um, and then the other picks, Caleb Elmers or St. Durant, Toriano Pride, great depth on that defense, which is needed. Um, and then it's a good class. I actually agree. I would give them an A. I thought this was a great class for how good the Bills are. Moving on to the Panthers, who I thought had an amazing class. I mean, Monroe Freely at 19. I was surprised he made it. I mean, he went behind a couple left tackles that I thought he was better than. Infano, who I thought was more of a right tackle, but it seems like Cleveland's going to play him at left side. And then Caden Proctor, I was surprised went ahead of Freeling, who will be this Panthers team hopeful future left tackle to protect Bryce Young for the future. The Lee Hunter selection I liked. I was surprised he made it that far at 49th. The Chris Braswell pick I thought was great. Another receiver for this team because Xavier Legette, so far through his young career hasn't really worked out. This team has Ted McMillan. They have Jimmy Horn, Jalen Coker. So, they have some young talent out there, and Braswell can be another great pick. Will Lee, I was surprised he made it to day three with how talented he was, especially this past year at A&M. So I thought that was a great selection. Sam Hecht out of Kansas State to replace Cade Mays was a great pick. Zakee Wheatley, Penn State safety that I think could, one day become a quality starter for this team. And then Jackson Keywatch out of Miami of Ohio. The linebacking core on this team is not the greatest. So I like, well, they do have Devin Lloyd, so it is better, but I do like that and still investing into that position. Maybe it's a hit, maybe it's not, but yeah, I would give this an A class. It was a great, it was a great class for this team to continue to improve. And Dan Morgan and Dave Canales are really starting to build something in Carolina where I do think in a couple of years they could potentially be competing to make the Super Bowl. with how great their free agency and drafts have been the past couple of years. Moving on to the Bears. I mean, I love their class. Dylan Thieneman, I was surprised Minnesota passed on him. So, home run pick by the Bears. Logan Jones to possibly compete with Garrett Bradbury as their future center. Um, just protected Caleb. Sam Rouse and Xavier Thomas, I thought were great pickups on day 3 or day 2. Um, as just quality players on the outside. Like Cole Kmet could eventually be moved on, so I think Sam Rouse could take his place. And then the day 3 selection is Malik Muhammad, a quality corner who, I'll say it again, I was surprised made it that far. And then Keyshawn Eatley and Jordan Vanderberg, I thought were great pickups for this team that needed to invest into the defense and made good selections for this team to, I think, continue to compete. So I'd give it a B plus probably. Moving on to the Bengals, who I thought had a really good class. That's coming from a Ravens fan. I mean, Cassius Howell, I thought was a first round talent. I thought he was tremendous value at 41 for how good of a player he is. The Takario Davis selection I liked. He was a guy who a couple of years ago was seen as like a top 10 pick, but had a down year in Arizona, transfers to Washington, and kind of, revived his stock, but not much. So I think that's a good pick. Connor Lew is the future center. You got to protect Burrow, which they did again with Brian Parker the second out of Duke. The Colby Young selection, I thought, Chase and Higgins, but you still need, somebody else, especially with Andre Yoshivas on the final year of his contract. And, the Landon Robinson pick out of Navy I thought was great, and Jack Andrews at tight end. Cincinnati did a really good job. I would give them a B plus for how great, despite not having a first round pick, which, a lot of teams that didn't have first round picks, it still felt like they were able to get good value at the picks they had the rest of the rounds. And it really shows that, if teams really just invested into making their team better instead of like reaching on players, I think they would be able to have it work out. Moving on to the Browns, who I thought had a home run class, a slam dunk class outside of the Fano pick. I was not a big fan of Fano. If they were going to go left tackle, go with Monroe Freeling, who I thought was a better tackle prospect, at least on the left side, than Fano was. But Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston were great picks. I mean, that was my receiver 4 and 5. I was surprised Boston fell that far. I was surprised Emmanuel McNeil Warren fell that far from 58. That was a home run pick. So I like 3 of the first 4 selections, and then Austin Barber and Parker Brailsworth, 2 offensive linemen to give this team more depth at that position. I like bringing in Justin Jefferson, the linebacker, out of Alabama, especially if Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is going to retire. You're going to have to replace Devin Bush and have somebody alongside with Carson Schlesinger. And then the rest of the selections I thought were fine. I thought the Taylor Green selection was interesting because they already have 3 QBs on the roster, so adding a 4th one is interesting. They did it last year, so maybe they just are like, putting out like 4 QBs and then they'll move on from one. But I would give them a B plus. I mean, they had tremendous value. Like outside of the final pick, which I still think is a good pick. I just think it was a little too high to go with Fano at 9th overall. But I thought the Browns did an amazing job. And if this class does work out, that'll be back-to-back good classes. And hopefully if they get their QB of the future in 2027, this Browns team potentially could be a future contender with the right pieces in place. Moving on to the Cowboys. Well, they did a good job. I mean, Caleb Downs was amazing value at 11. I was surprised he fell that far. So give credit for Jerry Jones to trade up a pick to get him. I was surprised the Dolphins traded back when they could have had Downs. The Malachi Lawrence selection, I thought there were better edge rushers, but it was clear that they valued him more because they have his D line coach now as the assistant D line coach in Dallas. So, bringing in a guy who knows the system. I mean, their their day two selection in Jayshon Barham, I thought was great value for a guy. They needed to improve this defense, and they really did that with Devin Moore. LT Overton, I thought was a great pick on day three. And then Drew Schoen and Anthony Smith, I thought were good players, kind of positions that aren't needs, but definitely could use, for short backups if those star guys do go down. So I'd give it probably a B minus. Moving on to the Broncos, who I thought it was an interesting class. Didn't have a pick in either of the two rounds because they traded out of their second round pick. Tyler Onyemata, they lost John Franklin Myers, so I did think it was a good pick to bring in somebody to replace him. But, Jonah Coleman thought was an interesting pick. Liked the player, but they brought in RJ Harvey last year. They brought back J.K. Dobbins, so it's a crowded running back room. But did like the Cage Casey pick, helping out that offensive line. Justin Jolie at tight end. I thought I thought with their second round pick they might go tight end. So like that, Miles Scott, David Bentley, and Red Murdoch. I thought were 5 selections at the end of day 3 to maybe be depth pieces that could potentially become starters. So didn't hate the class, but probably give it like a C plus. On to the Lions, who I thought had a good draft class. I mean, Blake Miller, I thought was good value at 17. You get to move Peninsula over to left tackle, the position he played in college at Oregon, even though maybe you want to keep him over on the right side. But you have your 2 tackles, hopefully the future, in Sewell and Miller. Derek Moore, I thought was a great pickup at 44th to give this team that secondary edge rusher they've kind of missed for a while. Jimmy Roller at linebacker. After losing Alex Anzalone, got to replace him alongside Jack Campbell. Keith Abney, I thought was a steal in the 5th round. I thought he was a day 2 at early a 4th round pick. So they got him in the 5th round. I thought was crazy. And then, Keldrick Law, another receiver out there for Golf to throw to. And then, 2 defensive tackles, I think, to help out this defensive line, which has very much, hasn't been the greatest the last couple of years because of injuries. And I think, good value for the Lions. So I give it a B. Moving on to the Packers, who I thought they had a good class. I mean, Brandon Cisse, I thought was an late first, early second round pick. They got him mid second round, so I thought that was great value. Chris McClellan out of Missouri, I thought was a great pick. I mean, Denai Dennis-Sutton, I thought was a tremendous pick for the Packers to really help out this team. And then, bringing in Jagger Burton at center when they've kind of shifted their offensive line a lot. And then Damani Jackson at corner to help out this team that had really some of the worst corner play this past year. And then Trey Smith, the Florida kicker. Brandon McManus clearly isn't the same that he once was. So getting his replacement I thought was good value. So I'd probably agree with the grade of a B plus. Um, Went on to the Texans, who thought it was interesting to go Keelan Rutledge. Trading up for him. I thought he was going to be there at 36, but investing into this offensive line to protect CJ Stroud, I don't hate him. And then the Kenny McDonald pick, I thought was great value. I thought that was great to see McDonald stay, um, in Pittsburgh at the draft, to hear his name selected and be able to walk up, even though he wasn't a first round pick. Marlon Klein out of Michigan thought was a great pick to, help out this tight end room and give Stroud, another weapon on the outside. And then, the day three selections I thought were fine. Another guard and Fibucci Wawu. I think that's how you say it. Wade Woodaz, I thought a nice linebacker for this team. Kamari Ramsey, um, at safety. I mean, this team loves to go shopping at USC, what they did with Kalen Bullock a couple years ago. So, like the selection, and then Lewis Bond and Aiden Fisher, I thought were, nice 6 or 7 round picks. So I agree with a B for the Texans. They did a lot good to improve this roster and make it better. Moving on to the Colts, who I thought had tremendous value on their day two picks with CJ Allen and AJ Halsey. I mean, Allen I thought was at worst like a early second round pick. Like I thought he was going to be off the board by the time the Bills went, but didn't. I thought he was probably the second best linebacker, third best if you consider Reese a linebacker, and that was tremendous value. AJ Halsey I thought was top five ish safety in this class. So I think that was nice value. Middle of the third round. Jalen Farmer and Bryce Betcher were nice. Fourth round picks to help this team out, especially that linebacker core is like one of the worst. So it was good that they used two of their first couple of picks on linebackers, and then a couple edges with George Gumbs Jr. and Caden Curry. I thought were um, fine day three selections, and then Seth McGowan and Deion Burks. I was surprised Burks fell that far to the seventh round. I think he's going to be a steal the draft as of now, and I think a really good class. I'd give it probably a B plus because I thought they had tremendous value for the players they picked. Moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. We had a very interesting class. Like they went Nate Boyecher with their first pick on day two in the second round, which I thought was a little early. Thought there were some better players available at tight end and at other positions. But I like the Albert Regis pick. I like the Emmanuel Pregnon pick. I was surprised he made it that far on day two. Tremendous day one starter for the Jags. Dalen Husky, safety out of Maryland, I thought was a decent pick. Wesley Williams, the Duke edge, I thought was great value. I was surprised he made it to day three. And then, Tanner Colts, Josh Cameron, and CJ Williams, can all be, you know, decent, reliable options at the pass catcher. Zach Durfee, the edge out of Washington, and Parker Hughes, the linebacker of Middle Tennessee. I thought were fine selections, so I'd probably give it a C plus, or I'll give it a C, just because there were some good selections, but it was still a very underwhelming class for a Jags team that last year I thought hit on a lot of their picks. Moving on to the Chiefs, who, I mean, if you watch my first round picks video, I hated the Delane pick. I thought there were better defenders on the board. I thought there were better players on the board in general. Like if they were going to go DB, Caleb Downs was there to be taken. So was Sonny Styles. Like I just thought crazy that they went Delane over both those guys in Styles and Downs. But like the Peter Woods pick and R. Mason Thomas on day two, I thought were great D line um, picks to help out this team. The Jaden Kennedy selection early on day three, I thought was good value for this team that has hit on a lot of day three corners. Getting about Jerry Sneed, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, all three guys who were plus starters for this team. Emmett Johnson and Cyrus Allen, I thought were nice fifth round picks to give this team some more depth on the offense. And then Garrett Nussmeier, surprised he fell to the seventh round. Now a lot of people were confused about what type of player is he? Is he better than his 2025 tape or is he worse? But Mahomes might miss some time early on, and I think Nussmeier could compete with Justin Fields to potentially be their week one starter and maybe get some plays, like maybe get a couple games in there before Mahomes has to come back. Maybe he can show off that potential everybody thought of him. So I thought that was a nice selection. If a guy is available that late in the draft, why not take him? He's not your franchise QB, but he can be, a possible starter this upcoming year if Mahomes isn't ready for week one. Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders, who, we all knew they were going to get Fernando Mendoza. That was a home run pick. But I like their day two selection, Trayton Stukes. I thought was a good pick to help out this secondary, which has been horrible for years. Keyron Crawford out of Auburn, I thought was a great selection, especially for how talented of a player he is. Trey Zune to be a guard and help out this offensive line to protect Mendoza. I mean, Travon McCoy might be the biggest um, steal of the draft because of how talented he is. It's just he fell due to injury concerns, but I thought he was a top 10 player in this class, so that's tremendous value. Mike Washington Jr., I thought was a nice selection. Genty is the starting running back, but you can't have a guy just be a bell cow back anymore. You got to have, some other backs in there to take off some of the um to like play and have Genty not always be out there. So that was a nice selection to bring him in. Don Johnson and Hezekiah Masses, I thought were two underrated DBs that fell to day three, so tremendous value there. Then Malik Benson and Brendan Cleveland, I thought nice, late day three selection. So I'd give it a B plus for how talented. Actually, I'd give it an A, honestly, because the McCoy I think was an A plus. So I think that bumps it up to being an A class. Moving on to the Chargers, who I like the first round pick of Akeem Mesidor. With no interior offensive lineman really falling, I understood them just taking edge, and Mesidor I think could be an immediate impact. Despite being 25 years old, I think he can be an immediate impact. Jake Slaughter, I thought nice interior offensive line, can play center, but they have Biadasz, so they'll probably play him at guard. And then Brandon Thompson, I thought was tremendous value early, day three. Travis Burke, Travis Burke, and then their last two selections of Logan Taylor and Alex Harkey, I thought were good day three offensive linemen selections. Like they need to prioritize protecting Justin Herbert. So I like them, drafting guys who can be who are going to be backups, but when needed could be starters. Genesis Smith, I thought was a steal in the fourth round, and then Nick Barrett to help out that interior defensive line, I thought was tremendous in the fifth round. So I'd give them probably a B plus. Moving on to the Rams, who and probably one of the biggest surprises of the first round going Ty Simpson. Still, don't agree with the pick. Like I get they want to prioritize Stafford's backup, but this is a win now window. And they could have had Makai Lemon. They could have had plenty of great defensive players to improve this roster. So, in my opinion, I didn't really like them addressing the future when it's like next year's class is going to be better and you're in a win now window. But I did like the match player selection and the Keegan Trust on day two. Thought they were really good picks to help out this team for the future. CJ Daniels, that was a nice selection as kind of a day three receiver, which they've hit on with Puka. They drafted guys like Jordan Whittington, Kanata Munfield in recent years. So I think Daniels could be the next um, good um, day three Rams receiver. And then Tim Keenan, who a lot of people thought could be like a day two selection, falls to the seventh round. So I like improving that defensive line. Even though they already have great players, getting a quality guy on day three, even in the seventh round, I think is tremendous value. So I give them probably a B minus because the Simpson pick I just think was just the wrong decision. Went on to the Dolphins, who probably had the biggest miss, in my opinion, in the first round, Katie Proctor. If they were going to go left tackle, go with Monroe Freeland. Like he was a better player, in my opinion, than Proctor. So I don't understand that pick. Did like the Chris Johnson pick, even though I thought there were better players on the board. Same with the Jacob Rodriguez pick. Like I don't hate those picks, but if they were gonna go those positions, I thought there were better players. Caleb Douglas, I did like finally getting weapons. They draft him, Will Kermick, and Chris Bell. I thought were, good third round selections to help out Malik Willis, Trey Moore, and Kyle Lewis, two linebacker prospects that will help this team out. Michael Taft, who joins his buddy Quinn Ewers in Miami. Kevin Coleman Jr., I think could be a steal of the draft because I thought he was at worst like a fourth round selection. I thought he was a really talented receiver that just kind of just didn't get the greatest opportunities until he got to Missouri. Seydou Traore, DJ Campbell, and Max Llewellyn. We're all fine. Late day three picks that, maybe if they work out, could be great, but they're not guaranteed. So I'd probably give them a D minus. I was not a fan of this class. Like there are some good picks, but there are some picks that like make me wonder if this regime is gonna make it past 2 years. Moving on to the Vikings, another bad class in my opinion. Went Caleb Banks, which I thought was a huge reach at the time. Still looks like it. Jake Golday, I thought was another huge reach. Like there were better players at those positions and on the board that the Vikings could have taken. Did like the Dominique Gorge and Caleb Tierney picks, even the Jacoby Thomas picks in third round. I thought were good picks. And then fifth round with Max Brenson, Charles Demings, Damon Claiborne, and Gavin Gerhardt. I thought were fine picks, but the top two I don't like at all. Like they could work out and be fine players, but there were better players at those positions and just strictly better players on the board that they could have selected that I think would have been bigger hits. So I'll give this a C minus. We're on the Patriots, where actually I did like this class. I mean, Caleb Lomu, I thought was tremendous value. Because I thought he was gonna be like early 20s, first round pick. They were going to trade up into like the late 20s to get him. Gabe Atkins, I thought was a talented edge that just fell. and New England picked him up. Eli Raritan, a nice tight end prospect. And then their day three selections were all right. I mean, I did like them improving the secondary and bringing in some offensive line help that was sorely needed in the Super Bowl. And then bringing in Barrymore, who could be, um, the backup to May, which is always, important to bring in a backup quarterback, especially we've seen in recent years where team season seems to be over once their QB gets injured. But I think it's great value. So I'd give them a B for this class. Saints, I mean, I love their class. I mean, Jordan Tyson was an A+ pick. I thought he was the best receiver. Christian Miller, I thought was a elite defensive tackle prospect, or not elite, but great. That I felt fell too far. Oscar Delp, another pass catcher for this Saints team, and then Jeremiah Wright, Bryce Lance, two I think good selections on the fourth round, especially Bryce Lance, the younger brother of Trey Lance, and then Lorenzo Styles, Barian Brown, who I guess will be their kick returner, but can also be a receiver, and then T.J. Hall. I thought were all good selections. Like Tyson was an amazing pick. Miller I thought was a steal. So I'd probably give this an A for the great players they were able to bring in to help out Chuck and this team to really compete in the NFC South. Moving on to the Giants, who, I mean, Reese is a great player, and I think he'll be a great pro, but it was the wrong pick. Like, I get if you're going to play him at linebacker, but the reason you draft the guy, the reason why he was so coveted was because he could play both linebacker and edge. And if you're putting him at linebacker as a rookie, and he's not going to play edge until 2027 or maybe into the future, it seems like the wrong pick, especially when a better linebacker prospect in Sonny Styles, I think, would have been a better pick. Did like the Maui Noah selection and Colin Hood and Malachi Fields on day two. Thought they were great picks and steals for those players. And then they had 6th round picks that I thought were fine, but they didn't blow me away. So I'd probably give them a B- for this class. That was a really talented group. Just some interesting pick at the top that makes the grade a little bit lower. Moving on to the Jets, who, I mean, I didn't really like a lot of this class. Like David Bailey, he was not my top edge. I thought he was, at least the third best edge if you consider recent edge, which I consider both edge and linebacker because, his the reason why he's so coveted is because of like both positions. So I thought that was a bad pick. The Sadiq pick was probably the best of the three in my opinion. And even that pick I really wasn't that excited about. Omar Cooper, thought it was a reach because Denzel Boston was still available. So I thought he was a better pick. Did like the D'Angelo Pond selection on day two, but outside of that, like Daryl Jackson Jr., I think could be a fine DT. I was a huge fan of Cade Klubnik. Thought entering this past, thought he could have been the top QB off the board. But maybe he can work his way to being a starter for a Jets team that doesn't have much really excitement. And then Inez Cooper and BJ Payne were fine picks. So I'd probably give this a C- just because their top three selections, in my opinion, were just not the greatest selections to go with if you're trying to build this team up. Moving on to the Eagles pick. The Lemon pick I thought was tremendous value. Like, how did he fall to 20th? I still don't know how, but it was a great pick. Stowers, I thought he was going to go in that range, so I like the pick, especially when he went a lot lower than other tight ends who I thought he was better than. Markel Bell, could be the Lane Johnson replacement, a tackle who has the right skill set, just needs to hone his skills. So, I think Philly, even without just that one, could possibly have it work out. Cole Payton, I thought was an interesting pick. Some people were saying he's Jalen Hurts, so maybe they're looking for a guy to beat Hurts' backup who has the same similar skill set. Micah Morris out of Georgia, I thought was a fine pick. And the rest of the picks they made, I thought were all right. They weren't the greatest picks, but they weren't bad ones to where they were, they weren't bad. I thought the Huard Bernard pick in the seventh round, guy similar to Jordan Mailata on the offensive line, a guy who didn't play football at all, but goes into the international player program and could, with the right team, could work out as a steal the way Mailata did back in 2018. Moving on to the Steelers. Thought they had an interesting draft. Like Maxey and Achour, I get they went in Lemon and they had to pivot, but thought there were better tackle prospects on the board. So thought that was kind of a reach. The Bernard pick I did like, especially since I thought they were going to go receiver with one of their top two picks. So did like that pick. The Drew Allard pick was questionable just because you already have Will Howard. You have Mason Rudolph. Aaron Rodgers probably is coming back. So are you really going to draft another developmental QB to sit behind Rodgers when next year's class is much better at QB? I know everybody says that, but like it truly is going to be better. And I feel like they could have just waited until 27, drafted a QB then, and moved forward with this team. Um, so that was my opinion. Did like the Dalen Everett pick and Jennings Dunker. Thought those were two good picks. The Caden Region pick, um, it was a good pick. Could be a receiver, could be a kick returner or punt returner. So good value there. And then the rest of the pick were fine. Like the Eli Heidenreich pick out of Navy, which is the first time in the common draft era that Navy has two players drafted, which is kind of nice. I'd give the Steelers a B. Thought it was a good draft, but it wasn't that great to where, I think they really hit on a lot of their picks. Moving on to the Niners, who I thought had a very interesting draft. Like they trade back multiple times and get Dazon Stribling out of Ole Miss, which was a huge, huge reach. Like there were so many better receivers that went behind Stribling that the Niners could have took, including Denzel Boston, who I thought was a top 20, 25 player of this class. The Mellow Height pick I thought was fine. Like thought that was around the range he was going to go, but the Caleb Black pick I thought was interesting. Didn't think he was going to be the third running back off the board, so was a little surprised the Niners took him that high. Did like the Grayson Haughton pick, but the rest of the picks were all right. Like it kind of felt like the Niners reached on a lot of the players they drafted, especially early on, and it kind of felt like that this was a class where the Niners needed to have some huge hits to show that they could be a contender, and I just don't think they improved that much to where they can be able to compete with the Rams and Seahawks in that division. Even though I think the Rams and Niners had like two of the worst classes. So maybe Seattle is going to repeat with how bad those teams did at drafting. Speaking of Seattle, did think of the reach for Jadarian Price, but don't hate Seattle prioritizing a position of need. Did like the two DBs, Bud Clark and Julian Neal at the end of both the second and third round. Thought those were good picks. And then, the day three selections were fine. Didn't hate any of them, so probably give them a B. a good class, but not a great one compared to last year's class, which I thought was a home run of class. But John Schneider is usually a great drafting GM, so I think we'll see plenty of these guys turn into starters and um top players at their position when it's all said and done. Moving on to the Bucks, who I thought had I mean their first four picks I loved with Bang, Trotter, Hurst, and Scott, all players who I thought um who were drafted later than I was expecting them. I mean, the only gripe was the Trotter pick because I thought CJ Allen was a better linebacker. So that's the only one I would sort of disagree with, but don't hate the pick. Like the Bucks are known for drafting well. Like Jason Light is one of the best drafting GMs in the NFL, and he did a tremendous job bringing in good talent for this team. The Demonte Capehart pick I thought was fine, along with Billy Schroff and Bayer Sharp. Like they were fine picks. Um, I like the first four, and I think Tampa gets an A for how good this class was. Moving on to the Titans, who I thought had a really good draft. Like Tate, I don't hate them going Tate. You prioritize bringing in a um, you prioritize bringing in a good weapon for Cam Ward. And then I like them trading back and getting Celtic Falk, who I thought, was a top 20-ish player in this class. Thought he was a little um undervalued. Like I think a lot of people saw that his numbers weren't the greatest, sack wise to where they were like, is he really gonna be that great? But I think, a very young player who Robert Saleh can mold. I like the Anthony Hill pick. Thought tremendous value for a guy who I thought was arguably the third best linebacker in this class. And like them helping out Ward with offensive line play, running back, and tight end, especially Nick Singleton, who I think could end up being a starter by 2027. And then Jake, Jackie Marshall, and Pat Coogan, you know, offensive and defensive line improvements. Tennessee, I'll give them a B plus. This was a really good class. I think they did tremendous with their picks, and I like the class. Moving on to the Commanders. I mean, I like the class. I mean, Sonny Styles was probably a top five-ish player in the class. They gave him a 7. Antonio Williams, I thought, was a second round pick that somehow fell to the third round. So tremendous value for this team that really needs to hit on these picks, especially with how bad they drafted in recent years. Joshua Josephs, I thought, was a surprise he made it to the 5th round with how talented he is. Katron Allen at running back, you know, a lot of people thought they might have gone Jeremiah Love at 7 if he was available. So don't hate going with Katron Allen, who, just like Nick Singleton, once upon a time was a really talented running back that just had an underwhelming year, along with being injured with Singleton, which kind of affected their draft. And then the last two picks, Matt Golden, center, you lose Tyler Biadasz, so gotta replace that. And then Athan Kakamanis out of Rutgers, thought was a fine pick. Marcus Mariota isn't getting any younger, so they might have to invest into that QB2. So I don't hate it, but that'll do it. And that'll do it for today's video. Hope you guys